This is Tom Schreiber, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
Tom Schreiber. Sidearm whip. Scores. Now in front. Fidel scores. Ball Rabel. Splits two and scores.
Kylie O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Kelly, not shy. Bounces one home. What a start.
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of pro lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam. Together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. Stoked to have you guys for another episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. I'm joined by my co-host, Adam. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm good, my man. Just got done my first job of the day and ready to talk some lacrosse. I'm excited to get to it.
Awesome. Ready to talk some lacrosse with you. We got a lot to talk about. We have PLL playoff predictions, John Grant Jr.'s record-setting day, and the 2019 WPLL All-Star Team that was announced last week. So a lot to talk about, but let's get started as usual with our fast break.
All right, so starting with the MLL on Saturday, the Outlaws got back into a win column with a 16-13 victory over the Lizards. The Bayhawks beat the Blaze 16-13 as well, and the Rattlers continued their winning streak, beating the Cannons 13-10. And then on Sunday, in their second games of the weekend, the Rattlers got win number 6 in a row against the Bayhawks 14-13. Next, with the PLL on Saturday, the Atlas defeated the Chaos 12-9. And in the 2 games on Sunday, in Game 1, the Redwoods clinched a spot in the playoffs with a decisive victory over the Chrome 18-7. And in Game 2, the Archers clinched their playoff berth, rounding out the playoff spots with a victory over the Whip Snakes 11-8.
Yeah, so there was a lot of great games this weekend. A lot of close ones with major playoff implications in both leagues. We're going to touch on a lot of them coming up, but let's start with the first one in the PLL, the Atlas over the Chaos. The Atlas did what they needed to do and get a win and added a little bit to their goal differential, but it ended up not being enough. But tell me what you saw from this game, Adam.
The main thing that I got from this game was Jack Kincannon is a number 1 goalie for any team in professional lacrosse. Came up huge, 18 saves, almost had a 70% save average on the day. He came up big when he needed to. That attack line for the Atlas also had another strong game. It seems that when that attack line plays well, whether it's Keenan McCardle, Eric Law, really anyone, Ryan Brown, anyone on that attack line plays well, that's when they've had the most success this year. So I'll be curious to see. Unfortunately, like you said, despite the win, they won't be in the playoff picture. So they'll be in that consolation bracket trying to go for that first overall pick. I'll be curious to see how that goes for them and what they do going forward. They potentially could have next year's first round pick and might have 2 technical first-round pick overall if Pat Spencer does decide to take on the PLL next year. So they may look a little bit different, as a lot of teams will for next season. But it's a good end to the regular season for them. Unfortunately, it's not the result they probably wanted when it comes to the playoff picture. But there's still some time for them to play really well and gel as a team going into this consolatory bracket, which we talked about a little bit when the playoff format was announced. This is an awesome way for teams to continue their season, even if they're not in the playoff side of things. So kudos to the PLL for this really innovative playoff bracket.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm glad we still get to see at least one more game for Trevor Baptiste, Paul Rabels, and Jack Kincannon. So because it's crazy to think that they're not in the playoffs. That obviously the Atlas were up and down all season, but they finished strong. Trevor Baptiste and Jack Kincannon, I think, were the two rocks on that team that really were consistent even when times were rough. So, and we were treated to a nice Trevor Baptiste goal in which he was mic'd up during the time they were talking to him prior to his face-off. He wins the face-off, goes down and scores, and then they're interviewing him right after. I thought, again, it just shows the innovation that the PLL has really brought to this league.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, too, with the playoff format, we get to see them play in at least 2 more games. They'll be fighting for that top draft pick. The winner will advance to that final draft pick game, while the loser will take on the loser of the number 4 and number 3 seed. So, we'll still get to see these teams, which is nice. And the draft pick is definitely a big thing. It's a big incentive even for these losing teams. You mentioned Pat Spencer. I don't know if it resets where teams can draft him again next year or or if he's still somehow locked in with the Archers. I don't know how that works. You still got guys like Grant Amon and Michael Sowers who could potentially be joining that draft next year as well. But let's talk about some of these young guys that are really doing well, that are in the league right now. And the big guy I want to talk about is Ryder Garnsey in that Redwoods Chrome game. The Redwoods needed to win big. They couldn't just get by with a win. They needed at least 7 goals to make their goal differential higher than the Atlas, and they got it done. They knocked off the Chrome 18-7. Huge day from Ryder Garnsey. He had 4 goals and 3 assists, and he was scoring any way imaginable. One-handed goals, one-handed passes, goals from the ground. He is so electric and so much fun to watch. And I have a hot take really to make. I think he may be the most electric lacrosse player we've seen since Mikey Powell. Is he the second coming of Mikey Powell? We'll have to see. I mean, he's only played 1 professional season, but just the way he plays and the creativity he has, I don't think we've seen anything like it. And the pure athleticism, I mean, he just scores from any way possible. And that's what reminds me of Mikey Powell is, even when you had him on the ground, he still was a threat to score. There's a lot of great guys that are out there that are same level as Ryder. You got Connor Fields, Matt Rambo. So I don't want to do any of those guys a disservice, but I just think the way he plays really reminds me of Mikey Powell, and it's an exciting brand of lacrosse.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. He's a super exciting player to watch, and they came up huge. It was going to be interesting. I was thinking before how last week ended for them, and Nat St. Laurent said he still had faith in these guys despite that big blowout loss last week, and they all came out to play in a big way. So kudos for the squad to get this decisive victory, and you saw a well-rounded offense from guys maybe that haven't lived up to the bill, like Kyle Harrison and Joe Walters this season. Some of the vets came up big in this one as well. So I think the 4, we'll talk about the Archers in a sec, but I think the 4 teams that were best all season made the playoffs.
No, I agree. I thought the Atlas were a little bit inconsistent, too inconsistent to really deserve to make the playoffs. They finished strong, but I think it would have been really a disappointment if the Redwoods had missed out and the Atlas had gotten in. So, I agree with you with that, and the same with the Archers, and we'll talk about them a little later. But, yeah, you mentioned that the Redwoods got a lot of scoring from all over the place. I mean, obviously the big guys were the Notre Dame guys in Garnsey and Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh had 4 goals as well, including a crucial 2-pointer at the half, a 2-point buzzer beater that really, gave them a momentum going into the halftime that put them up 8-6. So, those guys performed, but you mentioned, Kyle Harrison, Joe Walters, even JoJo Marasco got on the board, and Greg Granlian, he went down, won a face-off, scored a goal, and he ended up actually saying during the game, during another in-game interview, that he was going to give the ball to an Albany student who had cancer. So I thought that was a nice touch as well. Overall, that was my most exciting game to watch. And again, it would have been very disappointing if this Redwoods teams didn't make it, and it was pretty scary early on too. You saw Jules Henningberg take that nasty cheap shot from Queener to the head. He would leave with a concussion, but he said after the game, he tweeted out that he's doing fine. So I think we'll see him suit up in 2 weeks. I thought how the officials handled it in-game was great, giving Queener an 8-minute. And then I also like how the league followed it up, giving Queener suspension and a fine, because I think that kind of sets the tone and a precedent that these type of plays aren't going to be allowed, and raises the consequences for these type of plays. So kudos to the league for taking action on that, and they assessed it the right way and gave out the right punishment to Queener for that hit.
Yep.
But we mentioned the Archers, Adam. They're another team that they could have gotten in if the Atlas or the Redwoods would have just lost. But come game time, they had to win to get in, and they delivered. They beat the Whipsnakes 11-8, thanks in large part to our friend of the podcast, Tom Schreiber, who looked like a man on the mission on Sunday. So tell me what you saw from that game.
Yeah, it was a well-balanced offense, again, from an Archer squad who we expect it from. That attack line for them. Chris Cuccinello had a big day with 4 points. Will Manny as well had 4 points, and Marcus Holman only had 2 points on the day, but it was 2 big goals for that squad. And Drew Adams in cage in the second half really shut things down and held the Whipsnakes to only 1 goal in the second half in the fourth quarter, making 8 saves, almost a 90% save percentage for the second half. So the big players for the Archers came up huge when it was most needed. So this is the type of attack from an offensive perspective that we were waiting to see from the Archers. And, going back to the interview with Tom, he talked about it being a slow boil, right? They had their ups and downs, but they wanted to play their best lacrosse late in the season. And this is probably the game he was thinking of when it was talked about making the playoffs. And this really was a playoff game for them based off of the 2 games earlier in the weekend. This was a must-win for them, and they came out on the right side for the playoff picture, and they'll be heading into playoffs with some steam.
Yeah, no, and I think you mentioned it with Drew Adams, and just the defense is not allowed really more than 13 goals as long as I could remember in a while. And I think that's big because you have these high-powered offenses, and the Archers have kind of proven that as long as they can score goals of their own, they can kind of stifle those a little bit. And I think the biggest question, Adam, is do you go with Drew Adams the whole game? It's not that Adam Gittleman's playing poorly, but Drew Adams has just been playing at another level. I mean, he single-handedly won them that game, I feel like, in that second half. They got a lot of production from their attack and got the goals they needed, to come back and win. But I don't know how you can go into the playoffs and not have him play all 4 quarters. What's your opinion as a goalie on it?
Obviously, as a goalie, I want to play the whole game, right? But I think it's something to say for a squad that has been so consistent from the goalie position. Obviously, it seems like Drew has been playing at a little bit more consistent from a goals against average than Adam Gittleman has. But there's something to say about an offense having to change gears and face, like we talked about in weeks past, a different style of goalie in 2 different halves, whether it's from a hand perspective, which side you're shooting from, or a variety of different things. They're just 2 distinct playing styles, and I think that has to do with it as well. And Adam Gittleman didn't have the best game, obviously, of the season so far, only making 3 saves on 9 shots. But I think you have to stick with it unless Gittleman comes out in the playoffs in the first quarter and is just not playing well at all. I think you have to stick with the tandem just because of how well they've been doing since they switched to the tandem.
You make a good point, and as a goalie, you kind of know how different styles can actually affect, and I know as being on the offensive side that you do prepare for a goalie, and having to prepare for 2 distinct goalies, it does throw you off a little bit. It's almost like playing 2 different games, so very valid points with that, and we'll be looking forward to seeing how they perform come playoff time. But with that, let's go to a break. We'll hear a quick word from our sponsor, and then let's talk about these WPLL All-Stars.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time. We're going to talk about the WPLL All-Star roster that was announced. It is an honorary roster, so there's not going to be any games played, but it's really, the elite of the WPLL this season got recognized, and, really I think they did a good job of, getting everybody on the list. But on the Honorary All-Star Team, you had at attack, Dana Doby for the Brave, Katrina Dowd for the Fight, Hannah Nielsen for the Fire, and Kayla Trainer for the Fight. At midfield, you had Dempsey Arsenault for the Brave, Taylor Cummings for the Fight, Amanda Johansson for the Brave, and Marie McCool for the Brave. At defense, you had Meg Dowdy at the command. You had Meg Dowdy for the command, Katie Hirsch for the command, Alice Mercer for the Fight, and Tiana Walper for the Brave. And then finally in goalie, you had Liz Hogan for the Pride. Since the league is only made up of 5 teams, you really got the cream of the crop. There's one person I in particular would like to have seen maybe Sam Apuzzo get on. She had 15 points, but she was also playing on the Fight, with Katrina Dowd and Taylor Cummings and Kayla Trainer. A lot of Fight would have been on that roster, so I kind of understand that. And you got to kind of play the game. If you put one on, who would you take off? And I don't know if I would take anyone off this list. So I don't know. What were your thoughts on this, Adam?
Anytime you have a 5-team league, you're already going to have the best talent in the world playing. So to make this list is definitely a big deal for the players that did. Like you said, I think it would have been great for Sam Apuzzo on there. I think it wouldn't have been a bad add to have friend of the pod Kylie Allmiller as well make that squad. But I completely understandable with the players that did make the team. Kind of looking forward, I would love to see an All-Star game. I don't know if it'd be halfway through their season or kind of like the NFL does with the Pro Bowl at the end of the season. Just be another great opportunity for the league to kind of expand the growth of the game for the women's side of professional ball and see. But I'm really excited to see what they do going forward. It was a pretty cool opportunity for them as well to see what they did on Instagram with the announcing of the team. So good job by the WPLL all around for making the squad up.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said, maybe they have an All-Star game next year. Maybe I'd like to see it maybe kind of like the Pro Bowl, following the season. They've traveled to England and Japan in the past, so I think it'd be cool. Maybe not necessarily go global with it, but have an All-Star game in a different location than just like the East Coast, since they played only on the East Coast. Maybe you have it in LA where you have, the USC team is there and you have some other West Coast teams, or you have it down maybe farther south in Florida. The Florida women's team has been pretty good recently, so maybe mix it up a little bit in terms of locations, kind of trying to grow the game a little bit, kind of how the PLL is doing. But overall, great list. Like I said, it's hard to really take anybody off that list. So well done to the WPLL.
And this doesn't stop our just for fans notice, this doesn't stop our coverage of the WPLL. We're excited to be able to cover them this coming off season. And after season 1, they kind of rebranded to do the tour-based model like the PLL. And I'm excited to see what they have going on in the off season. We have some questions just like we may with the PLL, what an off-season looks like for the WPLL from a player movement standpoint and next year's draft. So look for more coverage and interviews from WPLL players and PLT going forward.
Yeah, no, we'll have Tiana Walper, who made that list. That will be our third All-Star on the podcast. She'll be joining us within the next 2 weeks. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that one. But like you said, yeah, we're excited to continue to cover the women's game even in the off-season. Now, going on from that, we're going to touch on the MLL. We had a record-setting day with John Grant Jr. Again, he broke the points record. The previous record was including postseason points. This new one was just regular season only, but he again passes Paul Rabel. He got his 572nd career regular season point early in the first quarter, and he ended up finishing that night with 7 points altogether, 2 goals and 5 assists. But, Adam, let's talk about the GOAT right now.
He for sure is the GOAT of at least the MLL going forward. I mean, from an offensive standpoint, this was an awesome turnout for him to have this many points in a game, and not only big for him, obviously, but a big win for an Outlaw squad that was kind of reeling from here. They hadn't won in 5 games, and so they had lost 4 in a row, and this was a big win. Obviously, the win's kind of getting overshadowed by the play of John Grant Jr., and rightfully so, but this was a big win for them kind of going forward with a few weeks left in the regular season to get this victory under their belt and get back in the winning circle. So, but awesome game overall by a lot of players, not just John Grant Jr. Ryan Lee had 5 points on the day. Chris Azalanian had 5 points as well. And from the faceoff X, Max Adler won 20 of 31 too. So definitely a strong performance for the Outlaws overall. But man, John Grant Jr., I think you could throw him out there when he's 50, and he'd probably still have the capabilities of scoring a couple. Just an awesome weekend for the Outlaws and their Denver fans.
It's crazy that he's at 44 years old. I mean, he really is the Tom Brady of lacrosse, essentially. Playing at a high level. And there was a nice NPR radio interview, too, that I listened to, just talking about how he really wanted to come back, for his daughter, and a lot of what he's been doing this season has been for his daughter. So really great story. If you guys get a chance to check it out, I definitely recommend it. But, yeah, we've enjoyed watching him play. I'm so glad he came back for another season because, we talked about how we were a little, concerned whether he still had it in the tank. And, he certainly does. So he's been proving that day in, day out. So exciting to see him finish out this season. And the Outlaws are back into the thick of it in the middle of the MLL. But let's transition from talking about one of the older players and talking about some of these younger players in the Dallas Rattlers. They won their 5th and 6th straight victories this weekend. They started out 0-7, are now 6-7. And, you know, if they win this coming weekend, they'll be back at 500 and, you know, in a dead heat for the final playoff spot, you know, with a bunch of other talented teams. So they're getting it done. They ended up winning against the Cannons 13-10. That was a big win for them. The Cannons just looked kind of asleep. You know, it was a solid game by them, but, you know, the Rattlers just have shown that they're going to play that run and gun style. They're going to force transition. You know, they have a lot of young guys. Ryan McNamara is doing wonders from the 2-point arc.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about, you know, Mike Chanichuk in the PLL, you know, the king of the 2 bombs. Ryan McNamara, you know, he had 2 in this Bayhawks game on Sunday, and that game was so back and forth. I mean, talk about a great game. It looked like the Bayhawks were going to, you know, come out with a victory towards the end. They were leading 11-9. And then the Rattlers eventually, you know, tied it up 11-11 and took a commanding lead off of a Ryan McNamara 2-pointer, his second of the day, to give them the 13-11 lead. And they ended up challenging this, so it was a little bit of a controversy because his foot did step on the line, but they said he released it beforehand, so that was a little bit of an issue. I know Cottle took exception to that, but they end up taking that lead, and then the Bayhawks come roaring back with a 2-pointer of their own. And pull within 1, you know, with 21 seconds left. They ended up getting possession back, but they ruled that the Rattlers had called a timeout prior to Jesse Bernhardt getting the loose ball, so the Rattlers would run the clock out and get their 6th straight victory. And I just think, you know, the guy that's really helped them turn this thing around is Sean Scanoni in cage. You know, he had 16 saves off of 25 shots in the first game on Saturday, and then on Sunday he followed it up with 11 saves on 23 shots. So he's just playing lights out in cage, and he's a big reason why this Rattlers team has been able to have this as much success as they have. You know, you have guys like Luke Wittenberg, Bryce Wasserman, and, you know, Bradley Voigt that are just, you know, really performing well. And then we've mentioned, you know, guys like Jack Curran and Ryan McNamara as well, who are getting it done at the midfield. Overall, they're just really playing with a sort of reckless abandonment where, you know, they know how bad they started out, and they're just riding this win streak, and they keep going. I know, I believe Bryce Wasserman keeps saying on Twitter, don't say the Rattlers are getting hot, because he doesn't want us to jinx it. But they are on fire right now. They're the hottest team in pro lacrosse, and, you know, they're right in the thick of things, and if they get a win on Saturday, they're back at 500 with a potential playoff spot on the line coming up in these final 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what they do from here. They have to be one of the probably most popular squads right now. Everyone loves an underdog story, and it'll be exciting to see what happens kind of going forward. So here, if you look at kind of the standings wise, they are obviously still out of the playoffs, but they're only 1 game out of that 4th spot with what Blazers lost this past weekend. They're only a game behind them, and depending on the Outlaws and Cannons kind of going forward, they have a game up on the Cannons and Outlaws right now, who are both 7-5. So depending on how their next game goes, these standings could look a lot different. And we talked about this last week, but it's just crazy how the first quarter of the season went. To think that this is where we would be. Those 4 squads in the middle, just like the PLL, are fighting for those final 3 spots. So I'm super excited to see what goes forward here. I think it's important to note, we discussed before, unlike the PLL, it's not first by goal differential, it's by head-to-head matchup. So especially for the Rattlers, obviously they need to keep winning just to get in that spot. But for the head-to-head for them against the Blaze and Cannons isn't as good as it is with Denver. So it's big that Denver's in that 3 spot currently, depending on how things go forward. So awesome time in professional lacrosse from the PLL playoffs and also MLL going forward.
Yeah, no, and the Rattlers have a big opportunity on Saturday. They play the Lizards, who, you know, are all but walking dead right now. You know, they're still turning out competitive games, but you can just tell they're not playing with that same type of energy that these other teams are playing. So good opportunity for the Rattlers to get their 7th straight victory. But let's go to our game picks, Adam. We only have 2 to pick. This past week, we both went 4-3. I'm currently sitting at 35-26. You're 32-29. So you didn't inch any closer to me in the standings this week, but you at least got it done where you needed to.
Yep.
And you got 2 games to maybe get a swing here. So let's go into these 2 MLL games. The first one is the Cannons at the Outlaws. Who you picking in this one?
I'm going to take the Cannons in this one. I think they're going to get back into the win column, and usually I make my picks to make the juiciest of outcomes. So with this loss and my pick for the next game, the Outlaws are going to be on the outside looking in for the playoffs. So I usually am story based when I make these picks. So I'm picking Cannons just for the storyline heading into the end of the season.
Yeah, and I'm going to go Outlaws because they do well at home, coming off a big victory where they saw a lot of people get involved and score. Obviously John Grant Jr., but we talked about even the rookies like Aslanian and Ryan Lee. So, I think they're going to get it done this weekend against that Cannons team and really, get back into this playoff race. But following that one, we'll have the Lizards at the Rattlers. I think I kind of know where you're going with this already, but who are you picking in this one, Adam?
I picked against the Lizards all these times, and I'm going Rats.
Yeah, I'm going Rattlers as well. I picked against them this past weekend, and I'm kind of regretting it because I was riding that Rattlers train for a little while. I got off, but hopefully they'll welcome me back on because I'm picking them this weekend over the Lizards, and I think they'll get their 7th straight win. But that wraps up our podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. Please go ahead and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review. Our interview with Chaos midfielder Deemer Class is currently out. We also have an interview with head coach of the Chrome, Dom Starcher, coming up later this week, so be on the lookout for those. But that concludes our podcast, so let's go into overtime, Adam. What are you looking forward to most this weekend?
I'm really looking forward to that Cannons Outlaws game. Probably has the biggest playoff implications when it comes to 2 teams, both in the hunt. So definitely looking forward to that one on Saturday at 5 p.m., so check that one out.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to the other game. The Rattlers, have a chance to get back to 500 with their 7th straight win if they get it done against the Lizards. So I'm excited to see how the Rattlers do and if they can keep the streak alive. But that wraps up episode 18. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you tune in next time to Pro Lacrosse Talk.